The ballroom glittered, but for Lady Seraphina Vance, the light was about to be extinguished. She stood beside the man she was promised to, Lord Julian Rothschild, surrounded by the most powerful people in London. In 1 second, she had everything. In the next, his voice cut through the music, sharp and cruel, publicly casting her aside like a worn-out glove. The silence was deafening. Her life was over. But then, from the shadows of the ballroom, a low voice spoke, and the most feared man in England, the reclusive Duke of Hawthorne, stepped into the light. What happened next would change the fate of 3 families forever. The chandeliers of Lancaster House dripped with crystal fire, illuminating the zenith of the London season. The air was thick with the scent of hothouse roses and expensive perfume, a fragrant fog through which the orchestra's waltz threaded its hopeful melody. For Lady Seraphina Vance, this ball was supposed to be a triumph. She stood, her hand resting delicately on the arm of her fiancé, Lord Julian Rothschild. Her gown, a deep sapphire silk that matched his waistcoat, had been painstakingly chosen by her mother to signal their perfect, impending union. Seraphina, at 20, was not a conventional beauty. She possessed a quiet intelligence, a love for scholarly pursuits that her father found baffling and her mother found problematic. But she was dutiful. She understood that her marriage to Julian, the heir to the Rothschild barony and its vast shipping fortune, was the foundation upon which her family's flagging prospects rested. Julian, by contrast, was everything the ton admired. His blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, his profile was as sharp as a Roman coin, and his charm was a weapon he wielded with casual precision. Tonight, however, that charm felt brittle. He had been distracted, his blue eyes skimming the crowd, his replies to her conversation clipped and dismissive. "Julian, Lady Gresham was just remarking on the new trade routes," Seraphina murmured, trying to draw him back. "She believes your father's new venture in the East." "Seraphina, do be quiet about trade," Julian sighed, not even looking at her. His gaze was fixed across the room, on Cordelia de Vere, the daughter of an earl, who glittered with a truly astonishing diamond necklace. "It is terribly unladylike." A flush of heat crept up Seraphina's neck. Before she could form a reply, the waltz concluded. The dancers dispersed, leaving a wide, open space in the center of the marble floor. Julian did not move to lead her to a chair. He did not ask her to dance the next set. He simply dropped her arm. "Julian?" she asked, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. He turned to her, and the polished mask of the charming fiancé was gone. In its place was a look of bored calculation. "Lady Seraphina," he said, his voice just loud enough to carry in the sudden lull. The nearest guests, including the gossip-mongering Lady Cowper, turned their heads. "I find myself in an unfortunate position," Julian continued, projecting his voice now, relishing the attention. The orchestra, sensing a disturbance, faltered into silence. One by one, every head in the grand ballroom turned towards them. Seraphina's smile froze, a painful rictus. "A man reaches a certain station," Julian announced, as if addressing a board meeting, "and he must consider what and who is conducive to his future. He must evaluate his assets." "Julian, what are you doing?" Seraphina whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for his arm, but he stepped back, leaving her isolated in a circle of staring eyes. "I have evaluated this arrangement," he said, gesturing dismissively at her, "and I find it lacking." A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air from the room. Seraphina's mother, across the floor, let out a strangled cry. "This engagement was a mistake," Julian declared, his voice ringing with cold finality, a temporary lapse in judgment. "The Vance prospects, I have learned, are not what they were presented to be. And the bride? He let his eyes travel over her, from her modestly styled brown hair down to her silk slippers, his lip curling. The bride, frankly, lacks the spirit, the quality required of a Lady Rothschild. It was a social execution. He was not just breaking the engagement. He was branding her as damaged goods, her family as frauds. Serafina stood rooted, her blood roaring in her ears. She could feel hundreds of eyes dissecting her, some with pity, most with morbid fascination. Her father, red-faced, began to push through the crowd, but he was too far away, too slow. "Lord Rothschild, you go too far," a minor baron protested weakly. Julian scoffed. "I go exactly as far as I wish. The engagement between House Rothschild and House Vance is hereby dissolved. I wish you well in finding a more suitable placement, Lady Serafina." He turned his back on her. The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing weight. Serafina's vision tunneled. She saw her future evaporate. The pointing fingers, the whispered insults, the life of a spinster aunt, the shame that would cling to her family forever. Her father was still struggling. Her mother was weeping into her handkerchief. She was utterly, publicly, and irreversibly alone. And then a new sound entered the silence. The slow, deliberate thud of a walking stick against the marble. A figure emerged from the alcove near the grand staircase, a place he had presumably been watching, unseen. The crowd did not part for him. It recoiled, melting away as if from a sudden chill. Alistair Thorne, the 12th Duke of Hawthorne. He was a man who existed only in whispers. The Black Duke, they called him, immensely powerful, spectacularly wealthy, and a complete recluse since his family's tragic deaths years ago. He was rumored to be scarred, both physically and emotionally, a ruthless creature of business who never attended social functions. Yet here he was. He was tall, broader than Julian, and dressed in immaculate, severe black that absorbed the room's light. His face, contrary to rumor, was not scarred, but it was harsh, dominated by intelligent, piercing grey eyes, and a jaw that looked carved from granite. He moved with a predator's grace, his cane tapping a menacing rhythm. He stopped directly in front of Julian Rothschild, who, for the first time, looked uncertain. The Duke paid him no mind. Instead, his piercing gaze found Serafina. He studied her for a long, agonizing moment, not with pity, but with an assessing intensity that was almost as unnerving as the humiliation. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, cultured rumble that filled the cavernous room. "Lord Rothschild?" Julian, forced to acknowledge the only man in England who outranked everyone in the room, gave a stiff bow. "Your Grace, a private family matter, I assure you." "It ceased to be private," the Duke replied, his voice lethal, "when you chose this arena for your evaluation." He took another step, placing himself between Julian and Serafina, a solid wall of black wool. "Your Grace, I meant no disrespect to you," Julian began, his arrogance finally cracking. "You disrespect the lady." The Duke cut him off. He turned his head slightly, just enough to address Serafina, though his eyes remained fixed on her tormentor. "Lord Rothschild finds you lacking, madam?" Serafina, trembling, could only nod, a single jerky movement. "Then he is, as I have long suspected, a fool." The Duke's gaze swept the room, freezing every whisper. His lack of taste is matched only by his profound lack of honor. He then did the one thing no one in the room could have predicted. He turned his full attention to Serafina, his harsh face softening almost imperceptibly. "You have discarded a diamond, Lord Rothschild," the Duke announced, his voice booming. a diamond I shall be pleased to claim for myself." He looked directly at Seraphina, his grey eyes holding hers captive. "Lady Seraphina Vance," he said, loud and clear. "My apologies for the lack of poetry. I find myself suddenly in the market for a wife. Would you do me the honour of accepting my hand in marriage?" The collective gasp that had been stolen from the room during Julian's tirade returned with the force of a tidal wave. Lady Cowper actually fanned herself, her eyes wide with disbelief. Julian Rothschild's face had gone from smug superiority to a sickly, mottled white. He looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Seraphina's mind was a maelstrom. She stared at the Duke of Hawthorne, this terrifying, powerful stranger who had just offered her. What? Salvation? A different kind of ruin? She saw her father, his mouth agape, frozen halfway across the floor. She saw her mother, who had fainted dead away into the arms of a terrified debutante. And she saw Julian. His fists were clenched, his face a mask of pure, undiluted fury. He had been publicly thwarted, his grand gesture of powerlessness turned against him in the most spectacular way. He had made her a pariah. The Duke had just made her a duchess. "Well, madam?" the Duke's low voice prompted her. There was no warmth in it, only a stark, demanding patience. This was not a choice. It was an escape. Julian had locked her in a burning building. The Duke was offering the only door out. To refuse him now would be to side with Julian, to accept the brand of unwanted. It would be the end. Her voice, when it came, was a dry rasp. "Your Grace," she managed, executing a wobbly curtsy. "You honour me. I accept." A low murmur exploded into a roar of conversation. The Duke gave a short, satisfied nod. He did not smile. He simply extended a black-gloved hand. "Then we shall leave. This atmosphere has become distasteful." Seraphina placed her trembling fingers onto his glove. The leather was impossibly smooth, the hand beneath it hard as iron. Without a backward glance at Julian, or indeed at anyone, Alistair Thorne turned and began to lead her from the ballroom. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, a sea of whispering, astounded faces. Seraphina walked as if in a dream. She kept her head high, her back straight, focusing on the rhythmic thud of his cane on the marble. She did not look at Julian, but she could feel the heat of his hatred boring into her back. The Duke guided her through the grand foyer, past a line of footmen who scrambled to attention, and out into the cool, damp London night. A massive, unadorned black carriage waited, the Hawthorne crest, a single severe silver hawk, emblazoned on the door. A footman snapped the door open. The Duke released her hand, motioning for her to enter. She did, gathering her sapphire skirts. He followed, settling opposite her. The carriage was cavernous, upholstered in dark grey velvet, and smelled faintly of old books and expensive leather. The Duke rapped the ceiling with his cane. "Hawthorne House, and be quick about it." The carriage lurched forward, the horses moving at a brisk, powerful trot. The noise of the ball faded instantly, replaced by the rhythmic clopping of hooves and the creak of the harnesses. They were plunged into the intimate, rolling darkness of the carriage, the flickering gas lamps of Berkeley Square flashing across the Duke's severe features. Seraphina's adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a cold, shaking dread. She was trapped in an enclosed space with the most enigmatic man in England. She had just bound herself to him. "You are shaking," he observed, his voice flat. He did not seem concerned, merely observant. "You will forgive me, Your Grace," she said, her teeth chattering slightly. "It has been an eventful evening." "Indeed." He leaned his head back against the velvet, his grey eyes studying her in the gloom. "Do not mistake my actions, Lady Seraphina. I am not a knight-errant. I do not rescue damsels." Serafina clutched her hands in her lap. "Then why? Why did you do that? You have never met me. You have sullied your name by associating with a woman who was publicly jilted," he supplied without emotion. "Disgraced? Found lacking?" She flinched at the words. "Yes. I assure you, Lady Serafina, my name is quite resilient. It can withstand far more than the petty theatrics of Lord Rothschild." He shifted, the movement pulling the fabric of his trousers taut over a muscular thigh. "As to why, the answer is simple. I require a wife. You, as of 30 minutes ago, require a rescue. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement." This was not romance. This was a business transaction. A strange, cold logic began to settle over her panic. "You require a wife?" she repeated. "You could have any woman in England. Why choose one in the midst of her own humiliation?" "Because," the Duke said, a flicker of something dark passing through his eyes. "It was efficient. You, Lady Serafina, are intelligent. You are from a good family, albeit a suddenly impoverished one. And most importantly, you will not come to this arrangement burdened with romantic illusions. You have seen the very worst of courtship. You will be practical." "Practical," she echoed, the word tasting like ash. "Press next. And I," he continued, "detest Lord Julian Rothschild. I have for many years. His father was a parasite, and the son is a fool. Denying him his moment of cruel theatre and taking the very thing he sought to destroy was a bonus. So she was a tool in his revenge, a pawn in a game between two powerful men. The humiliation of the ballroom returned, but this time it was different. It was colder, sharper. "What do you expect from this arrangement?" she asked, forcing strength into her voice. He seemed to approve of the direct question. "My terms are simple. We will be married by special license within the week. You will be the Duchess of Hawthorne. You will have access to my homes, my fortune, and my complete protection. Your family's precarious financial situation will be rectified." Serafina gasped. He knew. Of course he knew. Julian's words about her family's prospects made horrifying sense. "In return," the Duke went on, ignoring her reaction, "I require two things. First, you will provide me with an heir, a son, to secure the Hawthorne line. Second, you will be the epitome of discretion. My life is my own. You will not ask questions about my affairs, my past, or my business. You will be a duchess in public, and in private, you will be absent. Do we have an accord?" She was trading one cage for another, a small, shabby cage for a large, gilded one. But in the new cage, her family would be safe, and she would never, ever have to see Julian Rothschild again. And after the heir?" she asked, her voice small. The Duke's gaze was unyielding. "After the heir, madam, you may do as you please. You may pursue your books, your botany, or whatever else interests you, as long as it does not bring scandal to the name. You will live your life, and I will live mine." The carriage slowed, turning onto a grand, quiet street in Mayfair. It stopped before the most imposing house on the square, a vast fortress of Portland stone, its windows dark save for a single light in the foyer, Hawthorne House. "Do we have an accord, Lady Serafina?" he repeated. She looked at the harsh, handsome face in the darkness. He was offering her a shield in exchange for her freedom. But what freedom did she really have left? "We have an accord, Your Grace," she said. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Good. Let us go inside, Duchess. We have contracts to sign." The footman opened the carriage door. The Duke descended first, using his cane, though Serafina noted he moved with no discernible limp. He turned and offered her his hand. This time it was bare. His grip was firm, his skin warm, and the simple contact sent a jolt through her cold fingers. She stepped onto the pavement and looked up. Hawthorne House was not a home. It was a statement of power. It dominated the Mayfair Square, a sheer cliff of pale stone that seemed to drink the gaslight rather than reflect it. While the other homes showed signs of life, Hawthorne House was a silent mausoleum. The great oak doors swung open as they approached, revealing a butler who was the human embodiment of the house. He was ancient, impossibly tall, and dressed in severe black. "Your Grace," the butler, whose name she would learn was Hemmings, intoned, his voice a dry rustle. His eyes flickered to Seraphina for a fraction of a second, betraying no surprise. "Hemmings, this is Lady Seraphina Vance. She will be my wife by the end of the week. See that the Duchess's suite is prepared." "At once, Your Grace," Hemmings replied, bowing, "and send for Mrs. Croft, and refreshments. My fiancé has had a trying evening." The Duke led her inside. The foyer was a cavern of black and white marble. A double staircase swept upwards into shadow. The air was still and cool, and the only sound was the echo of their footsteps. Most of the furniture was draped in ghostly white dust sheets. "You do not entertain," Seraphina observed, her voice swallowed by the space. "I do not," the Duke replied, leading her down a corridor. He pushed open a set of double doors, revealing a room that was clearly inhabited. It was a library, and it was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of dark mahogany covered all four walls, broken only by a massive unlit fireplace. Two leather armchairs faced the hearth, and a vast desk, littered with papers, commands, and shipping ledgers, sat before the window. This was his heart, his domain. He drew straight to a chair. "Sit." She sat. He remained standing, looming over her near the fireplace. A moment later, a woman entered. She was the opposite of Hemmings, short, plump, and radiating a nervous energy. This was Mrs. Croft, the housekeeper. She curtsied deeply, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity. "Your Grace, an unexpected... that is, welcome home, Your Grace. And, my lady." "Mrs. Croft," the Duke said, "you will oversee the preparation of the Duchess's suite, all of it, the West Wing. Have it aired, cleaned, and staffed by morning." Mrs. Croft's eyes widened further. "The West Wing, Your Grace? But it has been closed since—" "I am aware," the Duke cut her off, his voice dropping a degree. "Those are my orders. See to them. Lady Seraphina will be the Duchess of Hawthorne. She is to be obeyed in all things. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Of course, Your Grace." The housekeeper bobbed another curtsy and scurried out, casting a final bewildered look at Seraphina. "The West Wing?" Seraphina asked, once they were alone. "My late mother's rooms. They are the finest in the house," he said dismissively, as if discussing inventory. He moved to his desk, retrieved a decanter of amber liquid, and poured a measure into 2 glasses. He handed one to her. It was brandy. She took it, the glass heavy in her hand. He took a sip of his own. "Now, to the business at hand. Your father." "Mr. Edward Vance." Seraphina tensed. "What of him?" "He is a fool," the Duke said bluntly. "A charming, well-meaning, and catastrophic fool. He has been playing cards at Boodle's and White's, 2 clubs he cannot afford, for the last 5 years. He has been borrowing against your dowry, which was already leveraged. And for the last 6 months, he has been borrowing from one man, Lord Rothschild, Julian's father." Seraphina felt sick. The brandy sloshed in her glass. Julian. He knew this. His insult. The Vance prospects. He meant He meant your father is bankrupt, the Duke finished for her. The engagement was the only thing holding the senior Rothschild at bay. Julian's public spectacle tonight was not just an act of social cruelty. It was a signal. He was releasing his father's hounds. By morning, your father would have been facing debtor's prison. Your family, ruined. She closed her eyes. The full scope of Julian's malice was breathtaking. He hadn't just jilted her. He had intended to utterly destroy her, to make her family's ruin a public sport. "I have already dispatched my solicitor," the Duke said, moving to stand by the cold fireplace. "A Mr. Harrison, from the firm of Freshfields. He is at this moment purchasing your father's debts from Rothschild. All of them. The price will be exorbitant, but I will pay it. When you wake tomorrow, your family will be solvent." She looked up, overwhelmed. "Why? This is more than protection. This is a fortune." "It is a trifle," he said, waving it away. "And it is part of our contract. You cannot be my Duchess if your father is in the fleet. It is untidy. I am purchasing your loyalty, Lady Seraphina, and your family's silence. They will not speak of this. Ever." "They won't," she whispered. She took a sip of the brandy. It burned, but it steadied her. "You said you require an heir." He nodded, his face unreadable. "The Hawthorne line must continue. My grandfather's will is specific. I must be married by my 30th birthday, which is in 3 weeks, and produce a legitimate heir, or a significant portion of the estate reverts to a distant cousin I despise. Your arrival tonight was timely. So, this was the final piece. She was a brood mare, a legal necessity, and a tool for revenge. A strange, bitter relief filled her. At least she knew the truth. There were no illusions here. "You are very honest, Your Grace," she said. "I find it saves time. We will be married, Lady Seraphina. We will perform the duties required to secure the succession. Once you are with child, I will retire to my own estates in the north. You will have London. You will have this house. You will have your freedom, as I will have mine." He finished his brandy and set the glass down with a decisive click. "This is a contract of survival, madam, for both of us. You are drowning. I have provided a life raft. Do not," he added, his voice hardening, "try to make it anything more." "I would not dream of it, Your Grace," she replied, her own pride stinging. "I am not so foolish as to mistake a business merger for a love match. I have had quite enough of romance for one lifetime." For the first time, a flicker of something, not quite a smile, but a brief, sharp glint of approval, lit his grey eyes. "Good. Then we understand each other perfectly." Hemmings appeared at the door, silent as a ghost. "Your Grace, Mrs. Croft informs me that a temporary room is prepared for the night, as the West Wing will require full airing." "See to it," the Duke said. He turned to Seraphina. "Go. Rest. Our lawyers will meet in the morning. The special license will be posted by noon. The wedding will be in 2 days." Seraphina rose, her legs stiff. She had entered Lancaster House as a sacrifice to her family's ambitions. She was leaving Hawthorne House as a commodity, purchased by a man who despised her former fiancé. She wasn't sure which was worse, but as she followed Hemmings up the grand, silent staircase, she knew one thing for certain. She was safe. And for the first time in her life, she was bound to a man who, for all his coldness, had not lied to her. Seraphina awoke to unfamiliar silence. Her temporary room was vast, dominated by a towering 4-poster bed. A young, nervous maid, who introduced herself as Clara, was building a fire in the grate. "Good morning, my lady," Clara whispered, curtsying so low she nearly touched the floor. "Good morning, Clara. You may call me Lady Seraphina." "My lady is not. I am not yet. The Duke's orders, my la. Lady Seraphina, he was most specific. You are to be treated as the Duchess." The weight of the title settled on her again. A breakfast tray was brought, and with it a note. It was not from the Duke. It was from her mother. "Dearest Seraphina, my child, my head is spinning. A Duke, the Duke of Hawthorne. Your father is overcome. A man arrived last night, a Mr. Harrison, and, my dear, all our troubles are over. That dreadful Rothschild. To think we nearly bound you to such a viper. You have saved us, my darling girl. You have saved us all. The wedding. We must plan." Seraphina put the letter down, a bitter taste in her mouth. Her mother, so quick to forget the public horror, so eager to embrace the new, wealthier cage. You have saved us. She was a sacrifice, just one with a better title. The day was a blur. Lawyers came and went. Papers were signed. Her father arrived, hat in hand, his face a mixture of awe and shame. He met the Duke in the library for 10 minutes. When he emerged, he was pale but visibly relieved. He couldn't meet Seraphina's eyes, but merely kissed her forehead and called her his Duchess. The wedding, 2 days later, was a stark, silent affair. It took place not in a grand cathedral, but in the Duke's private, dust-sheeted chapel within Hawthorne House. Seraphina wore a simple cream travelling suit. The only attendees were her parents, a beaming Mrs. Croft, and the ever-present Mr. Harrison, acting as witness. Alistair Thorne, Duke of Hawthorne, stood beside her, magnificent in a dark suit that might have been tailored on Savile Row. He spoke his vows in that same clear, dispassionate voice. When it was her turn, Seraphina's voice was steady. She was making a bargain, and she would keep her end of it. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, there was an awkward pause. The Duke did not lean in to kiss her. He simply took her hand, raised it to his lips, and brushed a cool, dry kiss across her gloved knuckles. "Welcome to the family, Duchess." That night, she was moved into the West Wing. It was breathtaking. Unlike the rest of the house, which was dark and heavy, the West Wing was a suite of rooms filled with light. It had clearly been decorated by a woman of taste. The walls were pale blue silk, the furniture was delicate French inlay, and the sitting room opened onto a massive, private conservatory, though its glass panes were clouded with grime and the plants within were long dead. It was also, she realized, completely isolated from the rest of the house. A long gallery separated it from the East Wing, where the Duke slept. This was her gilded prison, just as he had promised. He came to her that night. He did not knock. He simply entered her bedchamber, where she sat in a dressing gown, her hair brushed out. He had removed his jacket, his white shirt stark against the shadows. He did not speak, and Seraphina found she could not. This was the duty part of the contract. He approached the bed, his grey eyes unreadable. He was a handsome, powerful man, and she felt a tremor of something that was not entirely fear. He performed his marital duty with a clinical, detached efficiency. There was no cruelty in it, but there was certainly no passion. It was an act of grim necessity, a sealing of their bargain. When it was over, he rose, straightened his attire, and walked to the door. "Alistair," she said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Is this how it will be?" He looked back, his face a mask in the moonlight. "This is how it will be, until the succession is secure. Good night, Your Grace." He left. Seraphina lay in the vast, empty bed, and, for the first time since the ball, she wept. The following weeks established a routine. She saw her husband precisely once a day. They dined together. Their conversation was a strained, polite exchange of facts. He spoke of his shipping interests, of policies in Parliament. She spoke of the books she was reading from his library. They were two strangers sharing a table. Then, every third night, he would come to her rooms, perform his duty, and leave. The rest of her time was her own. She began to explore the house. Mrs. Croft, seeing the Duchess was not a demanding tyrant, slowly began to thaw. "This wing, it's beautiful," Seraphina remarked one afternoon, standing in the dusty conservatory. Mrs. Croft wrung her hands. "Oh yes, Your Grace. This was Lady Beatrice's, the late Duchess, His Grace's mother. She adored it. She loved flowers. Tended these gardens herself." "What happened to her?" Seraphina asked gently. Mrs. Croft's face closed. "It was a tragedy, Your Grace. The Duke's parents, and his younger brother, Thomas. A fire at their country estate, Thorncroft. His Grace was the only survivor. He was away at university." "My God," Seraphina whispered. "He was never the same," Mrs. Croft said, her voice low. "He was a bright, laughing young man, they say. But after, he shut himself away. He sold Thorncroft. He came here, to this house, and locked it all up. All the light. It went out of him. And out of this house." Seraphina looked at the dead, brown vines clinging to the glass. A man who had lost his entire family in one night. A man who had inherited a title and a fortune he never expected, all of it drenched in ash. She began a project. She called for gardeners. She ordered Mrs. Croft to remove the dust sheets from the drawing rooms. "This is a house, not a tomb," she said, with a flash of authority that surprised them both. "We will have light." Meanwhile, the outside world was buzzing. The Tun was desperate for a glimpse of the new, mysterious Duchess. Invitations poured in. The Duke, true to his word, ignored them. But Julian Rothschild did not. He had become a pariah. The story of his public humiliation at the hands of the Duke was the talk of every club. Cordelia de Vere, the heiress he had insulted Seraphina for, now openly cut him. His social standing was in tatters, and his rage, Seraphina learned, was festering. She received a letter, delivered by a menacing-looking man, not by post. "You think you have won. You think your Duke has saved you. You are a pawn, Seraphina. You are living in a tomb with a monster. He used you to settle an old score, and when he is done with you, he will discard you just as I did. But I am not done. A Rothschild always collects his debts. Be warned." A cold chill ran down her spine. She threw the letter into the fire, but the fear remained. That evening at dinner, Alistair seemed different. He was watching her. "You are pale," he noted. "I am fine, Your Grace. We are married, Seraphina. You may use my name. Alistair," she corrected herself. "I am simply tired. I have a gift for you." He motioned to Hemmings, who brought forward a long, flat velvet box. Seraphina opened it. Inside, resting on white satin, was a necklace. It was not a grand, vulgar piece. It was a delicate platinum chain set with sapphires and diamonds, shimmering like captured starlight. It was exquisite. "It was my mother's," he said, his voice quiet. "The sapphires match your eyes. Or, they matched the dress you wore, the night of the ball." She stared at him, stunned. This was not in the contract. This was personal. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you. Wear it to the opera. Thursday." Seraphina's head snapped up. "The opera? You are going out?" "We are," he corrected. "The world wishes to see the Duchess of Hawthorne. It is time we showed her to them. And it is time," he added, his eyes turning to steel, "that we reminded Lord Rothschild exactly who holds all the cards." The night of the opera, Hawthorne House was ablaze with light. For the first time, the dust sheets were gone, the chandeliers were lit, and the foyer was filled with staff. Seraphina descended the grand staircase, her hand tracing the newly polished banister. She wore the sapphires. They were cool against her skin. Her gown was a deep emerald velvet, a colour Alistair had noted she looked well in. She had chosen it deliberately. She was not the frightened girl in sapphire blue. She was the Duchess of Hawthorne. Alistair was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He was in formal evening attire, the severe black lines making him look impossibly tall and formidable. When he saw her, his gaze lingered, and the usual cold assessment in his eyes was replaced by something warmer, something akin to appreciation. "Seraphina," he said, his voice a low rumble. He offered his arm. "You look magnificent." "As do you, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady. "Alistair," he corrected her, a faint hint of a smile touching his lips. The carriage ride to Covent Garden was different. The silence was not empty, it was charged. Seraphina could feel the warmth of his arm through her glove. "You are certain about this?" she asked. "You despise crowds." "I do," he agreed, "but I despise weakness more. Rothschild sent you a letter, did he not?" Seraphina stiffened. "How did you know?" "I have men watching him. I have men watching this house. He is predictable. He is a coward who bullies from the shadows. Tonight, we step into the light. We demonstrate our unity. It is the only way to silence him." "And is that what this is? A demonstration?" He turned to her in the darkness of the carriage. "It began as one. It has evolved." Before she could process this, the carriage stopped. The Royal Opera House was a crush of carriages and high society. When the Duke of Hawthorne's carriage, with its stark silver hawk, pulled up, a hush fell over the crowd. The door opened. Alistair stepped out. The crowd murmured, craning their necks. This was the first time the Black Duke had been seen in public in years. He turned and offered his hand to Seraphina. She emerged. The gaslight caught the sapphires at her throat. She stood beside the Duke, her head high. She was no longer the jilted girl from the ballroom. She was a vision of wealth and power on the arm of the most powerful man in the room. They entered their box, the royal box, which was adjacent to the Hawthorne family's private one. Every eye, every opera glass in the house turned towards them. Seraphina could feel Julian's gaze from across the theatre, a palpable, burning hatred. The opera began, but Seraphina heard none of it. She was acutely aware of Alistair beside her. He was a solid, warm presence. At one point, during the intermission, he leaned close, his breath brushing her ear. "They are all terrified of you," he murmured. "They are terrified of you," she whispered back. "No. They expected me to marry some mouse I could lock away. They see you. They see my mother's sapphires. They see a duchess. They see a partner." Her heart skipped a beat. A partner. Not a broodmare. Not a contract. After the performance, they made their way to the grand saloon. It was here the trap would be sprung. They were immediately surrounded by fawning members of the ton, all desperate to gain an introduction to the new Duchess. "Your Grace, a delight! Duchess, you are radiant!" Seraphina handled them with a cool grace she hadn't known she possessed. She was defending Alistair's fortress now, and she found she was a natural sentinel. Then the crowd parted. Lord Julian Rothschild stood before them. His handsome face was thin, his eyes bloodshot. He was immaculately dressed, but he radiated a frantic, desperate energy. Beside him stood his father, a portly man with cold, dead eyes. "Hawthorne," Julian sneered, his voice tight. "And Lady Seraphina, or is it Duchess now? How quickly you trade up. Tell me, did he pay you by the hour for your compliance? Or was it a lump sum?" The saloon fell silent. Alistair's hand, resting on his cane, tightened. "Rothschild," Alistair's voice was lethally calm. "You are addressing my wife. I suggest you find a different tone, or I will have you physically removed from the premises." "Your wife?" Julian laughed, a high, ugly sound. "She is a commodity, a purchase, the daughter of a bankrupt gambler you plucked from the gutter. You think you've won? You think you've bested me?" "Julian, stop," his father warned, placing a hand on his arm. Julian shook it off. "No, he needs to know. You all need to know. You think he's a savior? He's a monster. A cold, calculating monster who used this woman's shame to settle an old family quarrel." "And what quarrel would that be, Lord Rothschild?" Seraphina asked, her voice ringing out in the silence. She stepped slightly in front of Alistair, a protective gesture that shocked him as much as it did her. Julian's eyes widened, furious that she had spoken. "You fool! You think this is about you? This is about our fathers. Ask him. Ask your noble husband what my father did to his—" All eyes turned to Alistair. His face was pale, his jaw rigid. "My father," Alistair said, his voice raw with a pain that cut through Seraphina, "was a man who trusted his friends. Your father, Lord Rothschild, was his partner in a shipping venture, a venture your father systematically sabotaged. He forged ledgers, he rerouted shipments, he bled my father's finances dry, all while pretending to be his confidant. The stress, the ruin, it killed him. My father died of a heart attack, a broken man, in a house he was about to lose." A collective gasp. This was a story the ton had never heard. "And then," Alistair continued, his gaze locking with the senior Rothschild, "you bought his assets for pennies on the pound, the very assets you had stolen. That is the foundation of the modern Rothschild fortune. Theft, forgery, and betrayal." Julian was stunned into silence. His father had clearly never told him the details. You lie," Julian sputtered. "Do I?" Alistair produced a sheaf of papers from his inner pocket. "These are copies of the original ledgers, Julian, the ones your father thought he'd destroyed. And this is a confession from your father's former clerk, a Mr. Bartholomew Tate, who helped him forge the signatures. He has been living on a generous pension from your family for 20 years. A pension I have now quadrupled." The senior Rothschild looked as if he might faint. "You," Julian said, turning back to Seraphina, his face contorted with hate. "You were just a tool, a convenient way for him to stick the knife in. He doesn't care about you. He needed a wife for his inheritance, and using my cast-off was just a bonus. He used your humiliation." "Yes, he did," Seraphina said, her voice clear and strong. Alistair looked at her, his expression unreadable, a flicker of hurt in his eyes. "He used my humiliation," Seraphina continued, "to save my family from a ruin your family engineered. He used it to give me a name and a home when you would have seen me in the street. He offered me a contract, Lord Julian, and he has honored every single word of it. Unlike you, who broke a sacred vow in front of the entire world. Yes, he used me. And I, your grace," she said, turning to Alistair, "used you. I used your name, your power, and your protection. We are even." She then turned back to Julian. "But you are nothing. A spoiled boy playing his father's wicked games. You are not a peer. You are a fraud. She took Alistair's arm. "We are leaving. This company is no longer amusing." She and Alistair walked from the saloon, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Julian Rothschild was ruined, socially, and, as the Ton would soon discover, financially. His father was exposed. They sat in the carriage, the silence electric. "That," Alistair said, his voice thick, "was not part of the contract." "No," Serafina replied, her heart hammering. "It was not." He reached across the carriage, his hand finding hers. He did not kiss her knuckles. He unlaced her glove, his fingers brushing her bare skin, and intertwined his hand with hers. "You defended me," he said, sounding genuinely baffled. "No one has done that. In a very long time." "You protected my family," she replied. "We protect what is ours. Is that not the arrangement?" He looked at their joined hands. "The arrangement, Serafina, I believe it is broken." "Broken?" she asked, her breath catching. "It has been replaced," he said, his grey eyes intense in the darkness, "by something else. Something I did not anticipate." He did not release her hand for the entire ride home. The Morning Post was explosive, confirming the total ruin of the Rothschild name. Julian vanished, but his silence was menacing. At Hawthorne House, the atmosphere had transformed. The strained, formal dinners were replaced by genuine companionship. Alistair now sought Serafina out, joining her for tea or sitting with her in the conservatory, which, under her care, was finally showing green shoots of life. They talked, truly talked. She spoke of her love for botany, and he spoke of his ships, his eyes lighting up in a way she'd never seen. She began to understand that his coldness was not the man himself, but a suit of armor he'd worn since the fire that had stolen his family. One evening in the library, as his 30th birthday neared, Serafina quietly mentioned the inheritance. "I am not yet with child," she said, dreading the consequence of the broken clause. "Let the cousin have the estates," Alistair replied, his voice startlingly casual. She stared, shocked. "But your legacy, the entire point of our contract." He walked over, taking the charcoal pencil from her hand. "That," he said, was the excuse. The inheritance, the revenge on Rothschild, it was all a framework. I have had the proof of his father's fraud for over a year. "A year?" she whispered. "Then, the ball, me. Why?" "I was there to observe Rothschild," Alistair admitted, his voice low. "I was in the alcove when he did that to you. I saw your face. I saw the strength in you, the way you stood, even as your world was ending." He met her gaze, his grey eyes raw. "I have been a ghost for 10 years, Serafina. In that moment, watching him try to destroy you, I felt alive. The contract was a lie, a way to acquire you, without frightening myself. You, with your quiet strength and your damned garden, you breached the walls." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I do not want an heir from a contract. I want a wife. I want you." Before she could absorb his confession, the library doors burst open. Hemmings stood there, his face ashen. "Your Grace, you must come. Now." "What is it?" Alistair demanded, the cold Duke instantly returning. "It is Lord Julian, Your Grace. He is at Thorncroft. He has set it on fire." Alistair went rigid. Thorncroft, the sacred ruined estate where his family had died. "Serafina, stay here. Bolt the doors." "No!" she cried, grabbing his arm as he turned. He knows it's your one weakness. This isn't about money. It's about breaking you. I am your wife. We are partners, remember. I am coming with you." He looked at the fire in her eyes, saw not a liability, but an ally, and gave a single, sharp nod. They arrived at Thorncroft to a scene from hell. Julian Rothschild stood in the overgrown courtyard, his face lit by the flames of a new fire. He was burning the estate's family chapel, the only structure to have survived the original tragedy. "Welcome home, Hawthorne," Julian shrieked, waving a torch. "You took my future. You took my name. So I am taking your past. I'm sending it back to hell with your family." "Julian, stop this," Serafina pleaded, stepping forward. "He left me with nothing," he screamed. "I know that feeling," Serafina's voice cut through the night. "I was there, in the ballroom. I had nothing. He saved me. Look at you, Julian. You are the one in the gutter now." As Julian stared, momentarily stunned by her defiance, Alistair began to circle him. "It's over, Rothschild." Julian saw he was trapped. With a final, inhuman scream of rage, he hurled the torch onto the chapel's dry roof. It exploded in a whoosh of flame. "If I cannot have my legacy," he shrieked, "you will not have yours." He turned and fled into the dark woods. Alistair didn't chase him. He stood frozen, shaking, as the last relic of his past was consumed. He took them from me again. The armor was gone. This was the man, raw and broken. Serafina ignored the heat, wrapping her arms around him, holding him fast. "No, he didn't," she said, her voice fierce. "They are in you, in this house. He didn't take your past, Alistair. He just cleared the ground. For us." He turned in her arms, his face stained with soot and anguish. He looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time, and his lips met hers. Amidst the falling embers he kissed her, not a kiss of duty or contract, but one of desperate, profound, and fiery release. It was the kiss of a man coming home. The fire marked Julian Rothschild's end. He was captured and committed to an asylum, his family's name ruined. At Hawthorne House, life was transformed. Alistair and Serafina's arrangement had become a true, loving marriage. When Alistair's 30th birthday passed, he calmly told Serafina he had willingly let his cousin have the northern estates, forfeiting the inheritance because he had not met the heir clause. He confessed that his legacy was not land, but the new life he had found with her. It was then that Serafina, her heart full, revealed his sacrifice was unnecessary. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach, announcing that Dr. Clements had confirmed their succession was, in fact, secure. They were to have a child, not for a contract, but for love. The Black Duke was gone, replaced by a husband and father, their union complete. She was cast aside in front of everyone, her life in ruins. He was a broken man hiding in the shadows. But when the Duke of Hawthorne stepped out of that crowd, he didn't just save Lady Serafina's reputation. He saved his own soul. Their arrangement began as a cold contract, a marriage of convenience and revenge. But as the lies of their pasts were burned away, they discovered that the most binding contracts aren't written on paper, but on the heart. What did you think of Serafina's and Alistair's journey from a public scandal to a private love? Their story shows that sometimes the greatest love isn't found in a perfect ballroom, but in the ruins of our lives, and that true strength is about facing the future, not just escaping the past. If you loved this story of drama, romance, and redemption, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a powerful love story, and most importantly, click subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss another chapter of real-life drama. Thank you for listening.